Type talk. Type talk. Talking type. Type talk. We're talking type. Oh, God. Oh, weird. Talking type. Talking. Whoa. Talking type. Talking type. Welcome to Talking Type, y'all. Today we're going to have a special follow-up edition to the last one. I don't know what's so special about today, but I couldn't sleep. You know, I've just been traveling. I just got back from Seattle, and for whatever reason, I couldn't get to sleep last night, and I was up till like 3 a.m., and then I just woke up and just shot out of bed at 6 a.m. And I don't know what is going on. I am so tired. And then I was going to take a nap, and that was like my plan for the day, and it just didn't happen. Type, talk, type, talk, type, talk, type, talk. All right. Yeah, so thanks for joining. I'm really sleepy, but you know, last time this happened, I just got really silly and goofy, and my play came out. So we'll see if it happens again this time. We'll kind of see what happens when I get extra tired. But you know, I want to follow up on yesterday's stream where I was talking about extroverted intuition. And particularly I wanted to talk about extroverted intuition and its relationship with the sensory. Because everyone knows SE has some special relationship to the sensory world. I mean, SI also. And I hear people say, let's not stereotype. Let's not say that sensing has a special relationship to anything physical. And it's definitely true. Someone made a really good post. I wish I remember their name, but it was on Dave Power's video on extroverted intuition on YouTube. And a commenter said, hey, when you have physical sensations, like, you know, feeling the physical, like, I don't know, sight and sound and the five senses, that you're not actually using the extroverted sensation function. Extroverted sensation is a way of organizing that sensory input. You know, I think in objective personality, we say that the extroverted perceiving functions don't organize, they gather. So that kind of goes against the way we've been talking about them in objective personality. But, you know, I see that point, that there is a difference between sensations. And I've also heard with introverted sensation, that introverted sensation is the feeling of hunger, or of having to go to the bathroom, or of being sleepy, or, you know, how your body physically feels. So, you know, I don't know. I imagine there's a difference between physical sensations and the cognitive function of sensation. But at the same time, there's a special relationship. But what I want to talk about is extroverted intuition and its relationship to the sensory world, the physical world, the non-conceptual world, the non-linguistic world, the non-metaphysical world. You know, because so much of extroverted intuition seems to be related to language and to concepts and ideas, and so many great thinkers are ENTPs, and so many great writers are INFPs, you know, kind of these like literary giants and so on. So I want to talk about extroverted intuition, and in that sense, and particularly I have one agenda item, which I got at last time, which is that in the objective personality system, which, you know, I've been talking about a lot, so if you've watched me before, you'll know objective personality is a kind of variant of Myers-Briggs and Jungian typology. In the objective personality system, they say that extroverted intuition gathers concepts and patterns. And I actually transcribed some of a video of Dave Superpowers, the co-founder of that system. And it's him talking about extroverted intuition. So I'm going to go into that in just a moment here. So I actually have I have my notes here from the Facebook group. I'm just going to start by just reading some of these. And you know, I'm going to first respond to something that Christine D wrote, and I'm going to share what she wrote, and I hope that's okay. I didn't ask permission, but it's a fairly public forum. It's a typology forum. I mean, it's a forum where anyone can join. We're all kind of posting. I hope that's okay. And then I'm going to respond to Mary Therese Lowry, who's a type researcher who I've been engaged with for a number of months now, talking particularly about extroverted intuition and introverted intuition. And I'm not going to take her comment as is, but I'll just say what it says, and then I'll read my response to it. So here is, oh, oops, I gotta get that out of the way. All right. So Christine D says, just give me a moment here. Any grabs stuff in front, while in the back other stuff falls out. Well, I love that way of describing it. That extroverted intuition grabs something, but other stuff is falling out. You know, it's different from introverted intuition where it accumulates. I just love this. I mean, even just this statement here is so good. Any grabs stuff in the front, while in the back other stuff falls out. I mean, it's funny because as far as I know, Christine didn't see my video. It's not like she saw my video yesterday, but that's what I was saying about the youth god who had the back of his head shaved, and there's statues that show, you know, the back of his head is shaved, and it's because all the ideas fall out, you know. So that's really cool that Christine said that. So, yeah. So I totally, this is great. So, and the extroverted intuitives are sloppy, although I like sloopy even better. They're sloppy taking in compared to introverted intuition. And I feel that introverted intuition gathers better. And when they talk, it's not from limited info. See, this is all kind of opposite of what objective personality is saying, because objective personality says that the introverted intuitives have a really hard time gathering information, that they don't take in new information hardly at all. They want to organize existing information. They don't want to gather anything new. And part of this is the nuance of what gather and organize mean in objective personality. Dave Powers and Shan, Renee, I always get stuck on her last name because I just feel like it's not really her last name. And when it, you know what I mean? Like when you, so I'm always like, what's her real last name? And I get stuck and I go, no, Shan Renee. It's like a pen name or a stage name or something. Or maybe it is her real last name. I don't know. It's always throws me for a loop though. But anyway, they're the originators of the objective personality system, and the way that they use the terms gather and organize are very specific. It's like jargon for them. So when they're saying gather, what they mean is something like take in information from a wide range of sources. One of the examples Dave used was if you're searching for information and if you're going to Craigslist and going to the last page of search results on Craigslist, that's not gather, because it's a known source for you, and you're going to your known source, and you're going deep within that known source. So I actually feel like objective personality doesn't really explain gather all that well, because they say the extroverted sensation function and extroverted intuition gather. What they really mean is that they're open to a wide range of information sources. NE is very open to information sources, and I agree. And NI restricts its information sources. I'm an INTJ, and at any given point, I can only have a handful of information sources. So I'll have a handful of communities, maybe even only one. You know, when I was on the cognitive type message boards, that was my only source of discussion for quite some time about personality type. And it's really hard for me to take in from multiple ones. Like, I start getting into host Eric, and as soon as I'm into Eric Strauss and all of his type theory, I'm having a really hard time sticking with objective personality. Now, someone might say, well, Jonah, that's evidence you're an ENFP. See, you can't commit to anything. That's not true. I've been committed to personality typology for 20 years or something, you know. I'm 35 now. I mean, I've been pretty committed to it since I was a teenager. And it's not that I can't stick with things, it's that I have a hard time with new information sources and unfamiliar information sources. Once I'm familiar with it, I can go back to it, you know. And so it's not even really like it's that hard to go back to an old information source. It's just hard. There's like a upfront cost to taking on a new information source. And that's part of introverted intuition, is this upfront cost just because of the unfamiliarity. The unfamiliarity is very expensive to INTJs and INFJs and ISTJs and ISFJs. If you're an IJ, unfamiliarity costs you a lot in terms of energy, in terms of attention. So, but okay, so I mean, Christine, I love how Christine writes. Extroverted intuition grabs stuff in the front while the back, other stuff falls out. They're sloppy taking in compared to introverted intuition, and I feel that introverted intuition gathers better, and when they talk, it's not from limited info. So yeah, this is kind of controversial in the unofficial Objective Personality Facebook group, because we're all students of Objective Personality, which is all about, hey, you're an IJ, you need to learn to gather more. And you're an EP, you need to learn to organize more. And oh, those IJs, they're always talking from such limited info, because they're not open to all that other info. And here Christine's saying the opposite. Christine is like, no, I talk to an INTJ, and it seems like they gather better than an ENFP. And when the INTJ talks, it doesn't seem like it's from limited info. And I think she's right, because I think what she's talking about, I mean, obviously there are, you know, ENFPs and ENTPs who have tremendous accumulated knowledge, although it's accumulated SI knowledge, and they have to slow down to access that because it's their inferior function. But, you know, NI and SI are the functions that accumulate. They're the functions that build up. They just keep building up and growing and growing and growing and holding on to things. In socionics, they're called journaling functions because they're like journaling. They're like a database that you can search. You can draw examples from it. You know, you can draw from this depth of knowledge or wealth of knowledge that's been accumulated over a long, long time. And that's very different from SE and NE, which are action functions, which are about taking actions to change things. And they're also observations. I mean, okay, SI and NI are observer functions too, but SI and NI are reviewing that database you've built and making observations about that and going, you know, I will sit there just thinking about the cognitive functions. I've been familiar with the cognitive functions since I was 15 years old. That's when I read Marie-Louise von Franz's lecture series on the inferior function, and I've reread it like 20 times now. And I mean, I'm looking at my copy of it right now. It's literally like the most accessible book to me in arm's length right past the computer. Maybe I'll give a little, I mean, just to see. I literally have it right there. Oh, well, maybe it's not quite arm's length, but there we go. Yeah. So, you know, this is like the 12th copy of this book. In fact, there's even another copy of it. That's a different edition. The same book. Probably like 2 or 3 copies because I keep giving them to people, and I keep losing them and stuff. So, or not losing them, but, you know, giving them away, I guess. Because I don't really loan books. I just give books to people. I just say, yeah, it's yours, and I'll just get another copy. Because loaning, you have to keep track of it, all that stuff. I used to loan books, but it gave me anxiety trying to get books back. It's always one of the most frustrating things, you know, just, you know, I gave that book away, now I want it back. Now I just buy another copy, and then if they give it back later, I have 2 copies, and I give it to someone else, you know. Or I just tell them to keep it if they like it. But anyway, so, you know, I've been reading the cognitive functions for 20 years, so it's all like old stuff for me that I keep going back to again and again and again. This is how introverted intuition works, is that I'm going back to that same information, and I'm looking at it and I'm observing it, because it is an observer. Just like SE, just like NE, SI and NI are also observers. So I'm going back and I'm observing, but what I'm observing is like what patterns emerge from that data. I'm not going out there and gathering new patterns. I'm not going out there and like, oh, I'm going to go to the cafe and gather a bunch of data watching real-life human beings. No, I go back to what I already know, to my limited information, and I see what new insights I can glean from that. So I'm trying to glean insights from known information, and this is NI. And NE is going to be going out there and getting stuff from new information. from new sources and so on. So, you know, Christine D is saying, well, NI gathers better, it seems like it does, when they talk is not from limited info. NE rather seems to go off from not enough info because their gathering is so sloppy and chaotic. Like reading 3 pages here, another half page there, an early jump on ideas, connections with not enough studying in depth. So, you know, I think that's true. I do. So, in general, I'm not saying this about ENTPs or ENFPs. You can be an ENTP or ENFP, and you can use a lot of SI, and you can be really diligent because you've slowed down into your inferior function. You never get it to go as fast as you want to go. You just start going slower, and, you know, then you're able to use it more. So I responded. I'll just read what I wrote. I was just saying earlier how I will read hundreds and hundreds of pages. But the whole time I'm reading, I'm scanning, so to speak. I am reading every word, sometimes multiple times, carefully, but I'm scanning for anything that deepens my understanding. I have an existing mental model, and I'm looking for whatever enhances or deepens my mental model. So when I speak from a place of authority on a topic, I have a deep knowledge of that topic. However, I also miss a lot of data. I can read the same book I've read 3 times, for instance, von Franz's lectures on Jungian typology, and see things I missed before. Well, yeah, I've read that one like 20 times, like no joke. I mean, I reread that one. Anytime I think I might have forgotten something, I reread it, and it's just, I see new things. I mean, it's so weird. It's like, how could I get something new out of it again? It kind of blows my mind because I always feel like I've gotten everything out of it. But sometimes it's just something I forgot or I knew, but it wasn't at the top of my mind. It kind of brings it up again. So I'm actually pretty lousy at consume. I have a deep knowledge, but I also have drawn hasty conclusions and arrived at a narrative. This is the way it is, and no other way. So this is an NI thing right here. That's the NI about trying to say this is the way it is, it's not any other way, it's just this is the objective reality. And NE is going to have that ideational destabilization, as Eric Strauss calls it, where the ENTPs and the ENFPs are going to go, but couldn't it be some other way? You know, they're going to think about other things, other possibilities. I am sure that ENTPs and ENFPs can also have a deep knowledge. John Beebe, for instance, is an ENTP with a very deep knowledge, but he also makes very different choices than I do when talking about the functions. By which I mean, I can still tell he's an ENTP. He's not doing NI things when he's talking about the functions. He's not trying to create these narratives that express the essence of the function. He's trying to show some of the possibilities, and he's very humble. I mean, ENTPs and ENFPs are very humble. Like, someone that he was seeing as a client told him that they were a different personality type than his assessment of them. And he said, okay, because it's unethical to tell someone they're not the type they think they are, and he just went along with it. And even if they really aren't that type, you know, later maybe they would figure it out or something, and he's just kind of like, well, I'll just agree with them that they are this type just to keep the ball moving, to keep it in play. But maybe a different time he might disagree, also just to keep the ball moving, to keep it in play. So the whole thing is extroverted intuition just wants to keep things moving, just wants to keep it going. That's part of it, part of its deal. It just wants to kind of, you know, it doesn't want to be trapped or stuck or run out of options. So BB's going to be like, he's like, I think you're this type. They say, no, I'm actually that type. He's like, oh, interesting. Why do you think that? Let's go with it. I would be saying, well, okay, you might think you're that type, but I really don't think you're that type, and here's the reasons why. And I would, you know, tell them. Although I get better at keeping my mouth shut, and I also have double feminine blast, so I do tend to put a lot of softeners. And you know, if you're not familiar with the genders, that's a concept from objective personality, where I have feminine extroverted thinking, so it's a lot softer, and I have feminine introverted intuition, so it's more meandering and kind of flowy and all over the place. And so that all over the place seems like it's really scattered, and maybe even is scattered in some sense of the term. And this is why people mistype me as an extroverted intuitive, but I'm not an extroverted intuitive because I'm talking about the one thing, ultimately. I make a little detour to clarify or to explain something, but what I'm actually doing is, I have a goal, and I'm oriented towards that goal. And that's my NITE goal. It's different from NEFI exploration, or even NETE exploration. But yeah, people say I'm an ENFP, and I self-assess as an INTJ, and I love to explain why I self-assess that way and why it seems like I might be an ENFP, but I'm not. So ultimately, I think NE and NI leads have different kinds of knowledge. The NE consumes all sorts of random things. Well, and they also consume from all different sources. They're actually consuming more because they have less preconception and are more open to things going anywhere. Yeah, they're not making a bunch of assumptions about stuff, They're not making a bunch of preconceptions. They're just open to wherever it might go. The NI is so focused on one line of thought that they only accept new information that is relevant. They dismiss all the irrelevant. And so they can read book after book and get very deep knowledge in certain ways while totally ignoring other things. It's highly specialized knowledge. And this wasn't all one post. I actually combined. This was my follow-up post. Because I didn't edit anything I wrote. I took some kind of best of from the comment stream. But if you're interested in this kind of conversation, please join the Unofficial Objective Personality Study Group on Facebook, because it's an incredible community of type researchers. It's really a high bar. It's great. It's just great. So, you know what? I'm going to get some water before I read any more. Let me put on what we've been listening to. I'll put on, this is a song I made. Make sure that works. Type, talk. Type, talk. Type, talk. Type, talk. Type, talk. Talking, type. Talking, type, type, type. All right, I'll be right back. All right, so yeah, so I just wanted to get a little water. Let's need a little water first. So I'm looking at my bookshelf now. I have about 200 books on Jung. Well, that might be an exaggeration. Well, actually, no, I don't know, because I put all my books in a database once, but I ended up giving away a lot of books. I'll put it this way: I've owned around 200 books on Jung. Easy. I'm not always great with estimating numbers. Numbers are a little bit hard for me. I don't want to exaggerate. I mean, right now, there's, what it is I moved to Santa Fe from Seattle in October. And I gave away so many books. I just really, the first time in my life, I'd given away a ton of books. And what I did was, before I gave them away, I spent just hours and hours putting them all in databases and looking them up and looking at the prices. And then just really also just asking myself, is this a book that I like? Is it inspiring to me? Is it exciting to me? Is it something that's just just that gets me going? So I did, I kept a lot of Jung books, but I did give away some. But anyway, maybe it's an exaggeration. I know ENFPs who are into Jung who only have a tiny fraction of the knowledge of what he wrote and his theory and different interpretations of his theory. I'm not trying to be a jerk here. I'm not trying to, like, you know, I'm just saying that that's okay. And they might be a better therapist. And they might be a better theorist than me. And they might, not that I even am a therapist, but, you know, they might be incredible, you know, in a lot of ways. I have so much, like, I sound like a total jerk when I say something like, oh, I know ENFPs only have a fraction of the knowledge. I don't mean, what I mean is that they don't, like, they just don't know a lot of the things that Jung said or wrote, and they don't know what books they're from, and they don't know the timeline, and they don't know the information about him, and they don't know the context of how he arrived at it. They just don't know a lot of stuff like that. But they'll have an incredible, I almost feel like extroverted intuition is like this incredible intuition on your feet, an intuition for keeping things going, an intuition for knowing when something's getting boring and when to spice it up, an intuition for knowing how to, it's almost like the classic form of intuition people think of, where they're like, wow, that person just had such good instincts. How do they know to do that? Well, they're really snappy, and they were really observant, and they noticed all these patterns, and they noticed that they could just exert very minimal effort to change a tiny little thing, and it would radically change everything. And that's extroverted intuition. So they don't need to spend 20 years reading, you know, tens of thousands of words about something. Not that the introverted intuitive does either, because introverted intuitives fill in a lot of gaps too. It's not that the introverted intuitive has to read everything to understand it. The introverted intuitive can absolutely read a little bit and read enough to figure out, oh, this is where it's going, and extrapolate from that. So I'm not saying that. This is not the best part of the comment. All right. So in that sense, as an INTJ, I'm an expert in certain aspects, while NE users will often be sloppy and chaotic. Yet in other ways, I'm not an expert at all, and they are more adaptable and able to pick up new information and understand it easily. I am an expert in what is familiar to me. I am horrible at what is unfamiliar. That's what it comes down to. I have to go back to the drawing board every time something unfamiliar comes along. Every time something changes, I just have to, like, start over, and it's super energy draining for me to do that. The same way for an ENFP or an ENTP, it's energy draining to be stuck in a concrete circumstance that it's exhausted all of the possibilities for change. When I started reading Jung around age 14, I was very bad at Jung. I made all sorts of wrong conclusions. This is another classic NI thing. An NE user is not going to make all those wrong conclusions, because they're going to start noticing those patterns, and they're going to be all open-minded, and they're not going to have preconceptions about where it's going to end up. They're going to be open to it going in any direction. And I'm an INTJ, so I start reading something, and I'm trying from page 1 to guess and predict where it's going to go. And then I'm like, see, told you so. Like, INTJs are the ultimate told you so type about, like, called it, you know, and it can be so annoying. I mean, there's a lot of stereotypes of INTJs as being really obnoxious people because of this. And the ENFP and the ENTP are way more popular and easygoing and go with the wherever it goes, right? The EPs follow things where they go, and the INTJ predicts where they'll go, and you may even bend the facts to try to meet that narrative. Like I've figured out that this is supposed to be this thing, so I'm going to cherry pick my facts to make that narrative to go in that direction. And it's funny because people accuse me of doing that about when I claim to be an INTJ. They're like, well, you're just cherry picking the facts that you present that make you seem like an INTJ to support your single grand narrative. And I'm like, yes, that is exactly what INTJs do. I'm being a little facetious here. So over time, I became familiar with Jung's work. Now, 20 years later, I am an expert in certain areas, but I still probably have lots of faulty assumptions and wrong knowledge, particularly around areas that are not familiar to me, which take me a very long time to get familiar with, or are even impossible for me to become familiar with if I'm not interested in them. Because INTJ has FI, and it's very much about what I'm interested in, you know? So then there's a comment from Mary, who I mentioned, Mary Therese Lowry, one of my favorite fellow research typologist researchers. And she said something like, well, Jonah, your description of extroverted intuition goes against Dave Superpower's description. And this is the description that I read in the last stream, the previous one, where I basically said, you know, imagine you're a restaurateur and you're an ENFP and you're making all these observations about patterns, like, oh, you know, we get a big rush from 12 to 2 p.m. and then people don't tend to come until 8 to 10 p.m. And then you're an ENFP, so you start to think, like, how could we tweak this? Well, let's have a happy hour from 6 to 8 p.m. because that might bring more people in. You know, stuff like that. And that was my whole example. And then Mary, she's going, well, that might be extroverted intuition for Myers-Briggs, but that is not extroverted intuition in the objective personality system. And I am a hardline believer that they're one and the same thing, that that objective personality is 100% compatible with Myers-Briggs. I mean, this has always been Dave and Shannon's implicit assumption, because when Dave and Shannon talk about cognitive type, with Juan Sandoval, for those of you unfamiliar, this is another kind of offshoot of Myers-Briggs. Dave and Shannon will say, oh yeah, they got this type assessment correct, and they got that one wrong. So they'll look at somebody like Robin Williams, who's an ENFP in classic Myers-Briggs, and in the cognitive type system, guess what? Robin Williams is an ENFP, the NEFI type with the TE subtype. And then you go to objective personality, Robin Williams is, guess what? An ENFP, the NETE type, which is basically NEFI with the TE subtype that they call the jumper. And so, but it's still an ENFP. So, you know, Myers-Briggs conventionally, Robin Williams is ENFP. And then cognitive type, ENFP. And objective personality, ENFP. Or Oprah Winfrey, ENFJ in all the different systems, right? Objective personality, oh, she's an ENFJ. So there's somebody who, you know, Robin Williams has extroverted intuition. He had NE. And then Oprah has introverted intuition. She had NI. So obviously when objective personality is saying Robin Williams is an ENFP and they're agreeing with everything else, they are talking about the same NE. They might be describing it in different ways. They might have different indicators for it, but it's the same thing. It's the same cognitive function. Some of it's just their opinion or their weight, but they're choosing to accent and they're accentuating certain things and not others. So anyway, so Mary's saying, well, hey, when you're describing extroverted intuition, it's not really what objective personality is talking about, you know, to me. Because when I'm describing extroverted intuition, I'm saying this is the ENFP restaurateur who's like, let's do a happy hour from 6 to 8 to see what happens, to see if we can get more people in, because I noticed the pattern that not a lot of people were coming in during that time. Noticing a pattern, and then taking an action to try to change that pattern. Or to try to keep the pattern from changing, to protect it from changing. So, you know, because the pattern could be you're making a lot of money, and you're an ENFP or an ENTP, and you're going to notice when something comes up that might prevent you from that pattern from continuing, and then you're going to make sure that pattern continues. So I responded to Mary, and here's what I had to say. Mary, I think you are correct that Dave defines NE as using your imagination to predict future outcomes and narrow down possibilities to what is most likely to occur. And I think that this is almost identical with how he defines NI, and is a shortcoming of his own lack of understanding of NE. I'm talking about Dave's superpowers here, and Dave's superpowers is an INTJ. So yeah, I think he describes NE pretty much exactly like he describes NI. Dave's superpowers says it's using your imagination to predict future outcomes and narrow down possibilities. That's basically what he says. And I'll read exactly what he says momentarily here. But Dave also hints at another version of NE which doesn't narrow down or predict future outcomes and is purely about gathering. So this was my point that, you know, Dave will kind of equivocate between NE and NI, and he'll say, well, NE is about making guesses and simulating and predicting. And those are the 3 words he uses word for word in his YouTube video about NE. And those are like the exact same things that NI does. So I think that's the problem where Dave doesn't, he's not distinguishing between the two as much, or he doesn't know how to distinguish between them enough. Because making a prediction doesn't involve gathering anything new. You can make a prediction through extrapolating, which is taking your known information and assuming that that known information can be used to predict the missing information elsewhere. But then in other places, Dave will say, well, extroverted intuition is about gathering. Sometimes he'll say it's about gathering concepts. Sometimes he'll say it's about gathering patterns. And I think gathering patterns is better, although it's still so abstract that the people in the objective personality group, the students, might not have realized that gathering a pattern literally means going, wow, most of the people come to the restaurant from 8 to 10 p.m. Let's take an action to try to see if we can change that pattern. It's like noticing things in the real world. That gathering a pattern does not just mean some philosophical pattern. Sure, it could be. You can read Hegel and go, wow, Hegel uses a lot of threes and a lot of, I noticed this pattern in Hegel's thought. Sure, that could also be extroverted intuition, noticing a conceptual pattern, but it can also just be a physical pattern. It can be a trend. It can be a correlation. It can be, wow, I noticed people who have short hair tend to also wear t-shirts. Oh, I noticed people who like sports tend to also like, red meat or whatever. You can notice correlations. I feel like I almost did extroverted intuition there. By trying to pretend to do it, I almost actually did it. It was kind of exciting. But I think I just went into extroverted sensing, which is a lot easier for me to go in when I had 3 hours of sleep. This is like a sleep depth, edition of Type Talk, and so it makes it easier for me to go into that. So, so in any case, Dave equivocates, he goes between the two, and sometimes he's talking about NE almost identically to NI, and other times he's talking about it as gathering concepts or patterns. So what I'm saying is, to Mary, yeah, I think you're correct. Dave does define NE the way you described, pretty much exactly like NI, predicting future outcomes and narrowing down possibilities. But I think this is a shortcoming of his own lack of understanding of NE, because he's an INTJ. And I mean, I don't really understand that much either, to be honest. I'm kind of grasping at straws. And then Dave also has another version of NE which doesn't narrow down or predict outcomes and is purely about gathering. Here is a transcript from Dave's most recent video on NE, where he basically describes it almost identically with how he describes NI. Oh, I sure wish I could do a Dave impression. With NE, you're just looking at the facts. The SE and the SI. I can't do it. He's such a fast talker. I can almost do a Dave impression. It'd be great, but I'm not going to. Okay. With NE, you're just looking at the facts, the SE and the SI. You now want to start to look at and understand the conceptual processes between them. Okay, so what the hell does that mean? Dave. Dave is great. Say you're studying business, and business is easy because it's so black and white and objective and kind of practical, easier to see, versus your abstract, subjective, weird, self-fulfilling fairy tale goals that you're trying to get done. So you're doing your market research on the business you want to get into, and you've got to know that information so well that you get to the point where you know what will happen even before it happens. I mean, this is NI. This is just NI right here. Because the whole thing is, NE isn't trying to accumulate and build up a whole bunch of knowledge because stuff is constantly changing. So NE knows that things are constantly changing, so they're constantly gathering new information and they're constantly adapting to that change. And what he's describing, what Dave is describing is like, you know something so deeply that you predict what's going to happen. That is NI. And it's purely NI. For example, say you've worked at a sandwich shop since you were a teenager. That's NI. Okay. That's NI. Sorry. I'll stop turning it off. But it's like, come on, like, you've done something like, okay, I've been doing typology for 20 years, so I know it pretty deeply. That's NI. I mean, NE is all about jumping from one thing to the next. Now, I'm not saying that an ENTP or ENFP won't stay with typology for a really long time, particularly if they have missing play, which is the tandem function that makes them want to skip to new things all the time, because then they would only have single activated NE. But I'm just talking about the function itself. The function of extroverted intuition is oriented towards adaptation to the new and being influenced by the new also. All the extroverted functions are open to influence. That's something people miss. They don't always talk about that, about how the extroverted functions are how we are influenced and shaped by the outer world. So the difference in an INFP and an ENFP, that INFP, their FI is not going to be shaped as strongly by their outer conditioning and circumstances, because that NE is relatively less strong. But that ENFP is going to have their FI shaped in part from the outer world because of that lead NE. But in any case, what I'm trying to say is extroverted intuition is adaptable. It's changing to the outer circumstances. It's adapting to the outer circumstances. And it's making the outer circumstances change, too. It's taking actions to play a part in actively changing those outer circumstances. But it's so different than NI, which, when he says, say you're an expert on something because you've been doing it since you were a teenager, that's NI. So say you've worked at a sandwich shop since you were a teenager. I mean, this is also SI. It could be SI, too. You have the experience. You know the numbers. You know the facts. So somebody can say, hey, what happens if Selma comes in and Barney's not there, and it's raining outside and you're out of meatloaf? And you're like, well, it's never actually happened before, but because I know all of those facts and all of those variables, I can paint a picture in my head of how that simulation would play out. And I could take a really good guess of what would happen. Keeping it simple, that's about it. You understand and know the subject at hand so well that you can start to tweak those variables in the abstract, in your imagination, and know with a pretty good prediction how things will turn out. Therefore, you can look at a subject like, oh, I want to get into coaching. I wanted to get into selling on eBay. And then my note here, Dave rambles off with his double feminine NITE blast. Because Dave and I are both INTJs, and we both have double feminine blast, and so we do have this thing of kind of getting sidetracked and going off. But we're also different. He has more play than me, and I have more consume than him. There's a comment from 3 months ago on that video. The comment is by Potato Soaz, which says basically exactly my point. And this is on the YouTube video. So here's the comment from Potato Soaz. The key thing to distinguish extroverted intuition and introverted intuition is that extroverted intuition doesn't form patterns from gathered data like introverted intuition does. It bypasses the data altogether and explores the many possibilities that exist in the outer world. It predicts the future, so in that sense this Potato Soaz is agreeing with Dave. It predicts the future without having to rely on past experiences, but it doesn't know which future. The inner world of the SI unconscious is very concrete, but the inner world of the NI unconscious is abstract and always forming patterns. So that's from Potato Soaz. So now my follow-up comment to the transcript from Dave. Notice that Dave describes extroverted intuition identically with how he describes introverted intuition, as organizing a whole bunch of known patterns and factors in the above example with the sandwich shop. In that example, the person weighs many factors that are already well organized. There's no gathering of new information. His answer when someone asks him what will happen is not to go out there and gather new concepts or patterns. It's simply using his already known, familiar NI stuff. And then Dave describes NE as doing basically exactly what NI does, using what it knows instead of going out there and gathering anything new. I mean, that's literally what, say you worked at a sandwich shop, you know all this stuff, so somebody says, hey, what happens when this and this and this happens? You don't have meatloaf and it's raining and this and that. You weigh all the different factors out and you're like, well, it's never happened, but I'm going to paint a picture in my imagination and play the simulation and predict the most likely outcome. That is introverted intuition. I mean, give me a break. So, oops. Okay. Dave describes extrovert intuition as doing basically exactly the same thing. Using what it knows instead of going out there and gathering anything new. So yes, you are definitely right, Mary, to say that Dave describes extroverted intuition as something you can do completely in your head, just like introverted intuition. And that's the problem. Sometimes Dave hints at extroverted intuition actually going out there and, gathering. So my attempt at describing what gathering patterns actually means is trying to fix this huge shortcoming in the objective personality system by clarifying what extroverted intuition can actually do through observation in the outer world, not just to describe it as basically identical to introverted intuition. Another comment on the YouTube thread, this one from Gale Dog. Dave is ironically oblivious to his own NI over SE discrepancy, not to mention contradicting his own previous definitions of functions. First, NE is just the abstract counterpart to SE. That's what Dave said first in his videos. NE just gathers in concepts. Now, it fills in the blanks and makes guesses. Parentheses, actually NI. So here's Gale Dog on YouTube saying basically the same thing. Now here's me. I think using known patterns to fill in the blanks makes more sense for NI because it's about what's already familiar and well organized, instead of gathering anything new. Extroverted intuition has to have something to do with taking in new patterns, no? So, yeah, I mean, this was really, that's the crux of it right there. It's, for me, when I talk about extroverted intuition, I'm talking about a function that is observing patterns, but postponing drawing conclusions from those patterns. A number of people on the Unofficial Objective Personality Facebook group said, no, they are drawing conclusions. The ENFP looks at the fact that it's not very busy from 6 to 8 p.m. and goes, I'm going to conclude from this that we should have a happy hour from 6 to 8. Well, okay, sure, that's a conclusion, so maybe I need a different word for it. It's very different than the way an INTJ might make an overarching conclusion. Like concluding, putting something in a box, limiting it, restraining it, making it, shrinking its horizons of possibility. That ENFP and the ENTP, they're really going to want to keep the options open. It's the hardest thing for them to restrict those options. And the INTJ and the ISTJ, they're really going to try to keep everything under control and tamp down the chaos and avoid the unfamiliar. And so my advice for you ENTPs and ENFPs out there is limit your options. Accept your limited options. And that's how you'll grow. And accept things just as they are. And, start to actually get in touch with your body. John Beebe said, he had the best one, he said that he started to actually be told things, communicated to, through his SI. So he would be talking to a client, he's a therapist, and he'd be talking to somebody, and if he actually noticed his SI, it would be getting really uncomfortable and like choked up and just not feeling good, and that would be because of something the other person was saying. So his SI was communicating to him, wow, they're going on the wrong path here. This is like the wrong thing for them. Or they're repressing a bunch of emotion, because he would be feeling their repressed emotion at a physical level. So those ENTPs and those ENFPs who are out there trying to maximize, kind of maximize their options and possibilities all the time might be neglecting what their own body is telling them. And if they just kind of surrender and slow down and go into their own body, there you go, right? And then the IJs, or the INJs, like the INTJ and the INFJ, have their own thing where they're so controlling, and they don't want anything to happen that they're not expecting to happen. They don't want anything to happen that they don't want to happen. There's so much like, I'm not going to go there because I don't know what it is. So afraid of the unknown, so controlling, and someone gives them a book, and it sits on their shelf for 3 years because they can't be bothered to dive into something totally unknown and random. So my advice for INTJs and INFJs, like myself, I'm an INTJ, is to, you know, loosen up and start doing random stuff. And it's okay. You don't have to have a plan. And even if you think that you're wasting your time, just do it. Extroverted sensing, just do it. I would never be doing these video streams if I didn't give myself that Shia LaBeouf, just do it, you know, thing. Even though, or Shia, whatever you say his name, even Shia LaBeouf, what is it? He's probably an ENFP. But funny enough, you know, you've seen this YouTube video of his where he's like, just do it. That's a very SE statement. I mean, both NE and SE are action functions. They're both not taking action. So really it kind of applies to both of them. But for the INTJs and the INFJs, it's so important to get out of their comfort zone. And you'll probably have a great time. I mean, you can't do it too much, but if you just slow down, because your introverted intuition, and I'm speaking to myself here, it's really my introverted intuition too, is so fast. Introverted intuition is so quick. It's going to make such a quick assumption right away. It's going to meet somebody within 30 seconds of meeting them. You know, I know an INFJ, within 30 seconds of meeting somebody, it annoys the heck out of them. He goes, now I don't mean to be presumptuous, and I don't want to step out of bounds here, but it seems to me that you might be suffering from unresolved trauma, or whatever. You know, I know we just met, and I don't want to make a big assumption here, but let me make all these assumptions about you. People hate that. They can't stand it. You know, the other thing they can't stand, and I catch myself doing this a lot too, someone asks a really simple question, and you answer with like a paragraph. Like, I asked my INFJ friend, I never see you have a beard. Do you ever think of growing a beard? And he goes, that's an interesting question. Or I think I even said, have you ever had a beard? And he goes, that is an interesting question. And I'm just like, oh no. And pretty soon he's talked, for no joke, 5 minutes straight. 5 minutes straight about what it means to have a beard or not, and why he doesn't have a beard, and why he thinks having a beard symbolizes this, and not having a beard symbolizes that, and how people treat you differently if you have a beard or not, and how this person had a beard and he thought this about them. And I'm just like, I just wanted to know if you ever had a beard. You know, but then I'm so guilty of doing the same thing. The reason I get annoyed about it is because I am and I lead, and you know, somebody will then ask me a question, and I'll answer in this like ridiculous way. Like I kind of did it a little bit earlier too. I got really stuck on like one of the things I was trying to read. And it's like, just read the damn comment. You know, that's what I should be doing. Just do it. That's the SE. But of course, the only way to really do that is to slow down, and so it's actually easier to do that when when my intuition is not firing, you know, so quickly. I actually am slowing down a little bit. So, but that's really my main thing is if you're an extrovert intuitive, you know, then you're going to be in that zone of just gather, more. And if you're an introvert intuitive, you know, you're going to be kind of afraid of the things out, you know, the unknown and stuff. And most of this is kind of what Dave Powers says, so we actually agree a lot. Like, this is like canonical Dave superpowers, you know, Shannon Renee. This is what objective personality says. Like, their whole thing is, and that's what their advice was to me. They told me I'm an ENFP, and they said, you're gathering way too much, and you're not committed to anything, and you're flitting from one thing to the next, you know, none of which is true at all. It's like the exact opposite of me. And they're like, you need to accept more limitation. And actually, because I'm an INTJ, it's the opposite. I'm way too controlling and I'm way too uptight in my comfort zone, and I need to just do things jumping in head first without thinking about it. But, you know, I forgive them mistyping me. I still agree with their advice for an ENFP. But the whole reason I'm doing this video and the thing that I don't agree with is how they characterize extroverted intuition. They go between characterizing it as gathering concepts, and then they characterize it as making predictions and simulating things in your mind and narrowing down to the most likely outcome, and weighing many factors at once, using all of your knowledge you're already familiar with, that you've spent years and years organizing, your deep, deep knowledge, That is NI. NE is broad, not deep. So I don't want to repeat myself. I know that I can kind of talk in circles a little bit, and that's partly my NITE circling the topic and, you know, amplifying it over time. But, you know, I just kind of wanted to lay out two of those, what I really agree with and what I really disagree with. So what I agree with is their advice. If you're an EP, slow down and get in touch with that inferior SI and accept the limitations and so on. And if you're an IJ, slow down and get in touch with that part of you that, you know, turn off that overactive, hyperactive, introverted intuition a little bit and just do it. Just do it. That's all you got to do. So, yeah. All right, I'm going to dance this out. I need more new pictures. Whoa. Type talk. Type talk. It's type talk. This isn't plugged in. Yeah. This is a really good book. Shout out to Mr. Nardi. This is a really good book. Alright. Thanks for watching, y'all.